What's going on, everyone? So it is Friday, which means we got a bunch more cards to talk about. And my goodness, there is one in here that I am extremely excited for. Brand new legendary and a lot more to talk about. I think there's like 8 cards in total. I'm going to try next week to go ahead and do a little bit of a weekly video, but we'll see if they keep dropping cards like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 a day. Then this might just be kind of the regular occurrence. But over the weekend, we're going to have some more videos. Before we get started, though, big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. Usually over the weekends, we get some games in, so I'm excited for that. And also, if you want to buy any of these cards, use my TCG player link in the description down below. Let's not waste any more time and dive straight into it. Starting off with a brand new event called Aid from the Innocent. By the way, this is one of my favorite arts from the new set, so far at least. I absolutely love the Ryloth arc from Clone Wars, and seeing Waxer and Boyle on a card just makes me unreasonably excited. But this is a 5-cost event, Cunning Heroism. Search the top 10 cards of your deck for 2 Heroism non-unit cards and discard them. For this phase, you may play the discarded cards, and they each cost 2 less. So kind of an interesting card where you're getting to draw 2 essentially by looking through the top 10 cards of your deck. And then, well, for non-unit cards, that is. And then you're getting a little bit of a resource discount on them. So let's say you were to pick up 2 events that cost 2 resources, like, I don't know, or maybe even a 3 resource one, then like Spare the Target. Then you could potentially kind of make up for the cost of drawing them. So for example, you pay 5 for this, you get 2 resource discount on the other 2. So let's say there are 2 cost events. Bamboozle could be one of them, for example. Suddenly, you've essentially paid 1 resource in addition to get the card selection to pick up 2 non-unit cards, 2 Heroism non-unit cards, and then play them both. If they start to cost more, like Spare the Target, for example, then you'll still need to pay those costs. So you're going to need 6 resources to play a 3-cost event and a 2-cost event on that same turn. It's only for this phase, so remember, you must play this event, and then you must use those cards because you have discarded them, which makes it a little bit tricky. So it's a little bit misleading in that it's not really a 5-cost event. This is more like a 6 or 7-cost event so that you'll have enough cards in your deck to pick up out of the top 10 that you searched and play them. And remember, it's non-unit heroism cards. So I thought of events, but you could also pick up like Jedi lightsabers or upgrades or whatever non-unit card you have. And it has to be heroism non-unit cards. This makes it a lot more tricky. If this was non-unit cards, period, maybe there's some sort of vigilance, cunning, heroism deck where you're able to pick up rivals falls, takedowns, and things like that. But unfortunately, that isn't really the case here on Aid from the Innocent. I think this card's pretty bad, to be honest, but at least it's sweet art. Next up, we have Savage Oppress. I believe this is KTOD's exclusive reveal card. This was a really, really cool one to see. It's a 7-cost ground unit in aggression villainy. It is a 7/7 Force Knight, which is kind of funny. Maybe there's going to be some sort of Knight. I mean, we knew there was going to be Night Sisters because they mentioned it, but maybe there's going to be some sort of like Night Sister tag. And Knight is supposed to be Night Sisters and the Night Brothers, but really Night Brothers don't exist. And then an Underworld. So very, very interesting tags, obviously to match up with the Maul, since Savage Oppress was very much an Underworld character out after the first few scenes that we saw him in. When played, if you control fewer units, including this one, than an opponent, you get to ready this unit. So very interesting. This is a very interesting card in that what you're looking to do is kind of use this as potentially a board stabilizer or a maybe board finisher. The tricky part about this is the fact that you have to control fewer units than an opponent. When I see this card, if this was in reverse, in that if you controlled more units than an opponent, you get to ready it, I would be much more excited about it because you could be playing a more aggressive deck with aggression villainy here, curve out, and then at the end of your curve, you play Savage Oppress. Most likely you'll have more units than your opponent because you're curving out trying to hit their base, and suddenly you're able to play this, ready it immediately, sort of like a guerrilla attack pod finisher. On the flip side, because it's controlling fewer or more units, it also could be used in a more mid-rangey controlling deck where your opponent's trying to flood the board. There is also another consideration, which is set 3. If your opponent's playing a token deck and you're not, this is almost always going to be immediately ready when he comes down. If this had Overwhelm, I would be significantly more excited about this because you might be wanting to pick off these smaller units and hit your opponent for damage. The fact that it doesn't have Overwhelm, the fact that it's a 7-cost unit, and the fact that you have to control fewer units than an opponent, to me, this looks like kind of a mediocre card. Like, I don't really see why you'd be playing Savage Press over something like a Maul, like the Maul we have. Granted, it is a different aspect, right? So that is a consideration, but usually aggression villainy isn't even looking for 7 resource plays unless you're a more controlling deck like Vader Blue, and I'd much rather have so many different other cards, even ones that cost 1 more like Palpatine or Snoke coming down at that point. So I'm not very convinced by this card. It is sweet. It does have the Force tag, which could be relevant, but it is 7 cost, and the fact that it's 7 cost means that the Force tag is largely irrelevant for most of what you're trying to do. Next up, we have a B1 attack platform. Kind of an interesting stat line. It's a 3-resource ground unit in aggression villainy as a 5/2 separatist droid trooper. Now, here's the tricky part about this. Very straightforward, very vanilla unit, right? 5/2. This is an awful stat line for set 3. You might think, oh, this is a pretty aggressive unit, and yes, it'll trade off with a lot of things on turn 1, but that's not even necessarily the thing I'm worried about. This is something that just straight up trades with a clone trooper token as a full unit. The fact that it has 3 toughness makes it extremely weak to various tokens just taking it out. 3 toughness is a lot more than 2 when it comes to set 3, specifically because of that. Heck, even 2 battle trade tokens can trade with a B1 attack platform if you attack with both of them. So even though it's got 5 power, which could be interesting in some situations, it does have the separatist tag and the droid tag and the trooper tag, which are all pretty relevant, right? Droid tag, especially in set 3 for separatists, separatist tag for separatists as well. Maybe there's going to be a deck that really wants a critical mass of separatists on curve, and B1 attack platform's okay there. But if clone trooper tokens are going to be good, and this card's going to be bad. That's just kind of how I see it. Another note, we got another card in Maul, a brand new leader. This one's pretty cool. We have a aggression villainy leader with an action to attack with a unit. It gains Overwhelm for this attack. Pretty straightforward, kind of like a Moff Gideon, but instead of, having to have a 3-cost less unit, you get to do it with any unit. Any unit can gain Overwhelm, and that's pretty impactful, because if you're playing a more mid-range focused deck where you're trying to play units, take out your opponent's units, you can suddenly outsize them while also hitting their base for damage, helping you to close out the game, which is pretty impactful. He flips for 6 resources as a 6/6 Overwhelm that gives each other friendly unit Overwhelm. That's also pretty interesting. Now, here's what I'll say. If you're playing a more mid-range deck and you're trying to outsize your opponent and trying to give Overwhelm to all your units and then kill their units, hit their base, you don't really have a problem with closing out the game usually, and the Overwhelm factor is not necessarily going to be massive. If you're playing a more aggressive deck and you're trying to get value trades in and hit their base, that's where Overwhelm can be exceptional. But the problem with that is if you're playing a more aggressive deck, well, you get a 6-cost leader flip, and that's a pretty big downside. If you're playing a mid-range deck, a 6-cost leader flip is also something that could be concerning simply for the fact that it might come down too late against the more aggressive decks. However, the stat line of it being a 6/6 is something that we haven't really seen before. This is a lot of power and a decent chunk of toughness. Usually for 6 resources, what we're seeing are 4/7s. And so 6/6, I would say in general, is going to be a preferred stat line over a 4/7. It does trade with things like Poe Dameron, but at least it trades, right? A 4/7 doesn't trade with Poe Dameron. Poe Dameron kills it straight up because you can discard a card to deal 2 damage to that unit it's attacking. Wrecker straight up kills your 4/7s. It trades with Maul. So the 6/6 is a much better stat line than 4/7, at least in my opinion. I'm just not convinced that this Overwhelm, I know a lot of people are excited about it, is actually going to be what you're wanting to do in the more mid-range style decks. And the more aggressive decks, I think it's actually a little bit too weak because you're not looking to actually trade off units all that often. And if you are, it's not going to be much damage that you're overwhelming over for. If I were to look at this and be like, okay, do I want to play this? Let's say I'm playing a villainy aggression deck and I wanted to be aggressive. Do I want to play this or do I want to play Kylo Ren? I would lean towards Kylo Ren as being the better aggressive deck. If I want to play a more mid-range style of deck, do I want to play Maul here or do I want to play Vader? I would lean towards Vader, right? So I'm not sure where this guy fits so far. Maybe just because he's a 6/6 on flip, he's just going to be the preferred one as a way to really close out the game, because that could just matter. But next one, we got a really crazy one, a 15 cost event, the Invasion of Christophsis, a Vigilance card. It is a Separatist card, but it's not a Vigilance villainy, just a Separatist card. And it has Exploit 4, choose an opponent, defeat each unit that player controls. Absolutely absurd card. And I actually think this is playable. Not necessarily like insane or anything like that, but kind of just think of what you could do with this card. Any card with the exploit, I'm going to take a double look at, of course, while we get more cards in the set, because this really hinges on the ability for you to produce a lot of early Battle Droid tokens or Clone Trooper tokens or something to exploit out. Remember, it's not a villainy card, so it doesn't cost 17 or whatever, which would put it out of range, I would think, for heroism decks, but this just costs 15. You can sacrifice or defeat 4 units that you control to make it cost a total of 8 less, putting it at 7 resources. If you think about what this could do, let's say you go create Battle Droid tokens throughout the early game, your opponent doesn't really care about them or doesn't want to spend their actions trying to defeat all your little Battle Droid tokens. Maybe that's going to be something that you have to do. But let's say you have 7 resources and you have a couple Battle Droid tokens, you got a couple important units, and your opponent has like 2 units, 3 units. This is suddenly a 7 resource. You defeat all your Battle Droid tokens and you kill 2 to 3 of their units. That could potentially be good. Now, I will hold off on saying that this is like a great card. If I were to give my initial rating on this card, I would say that that's probably not that great. But again, that's because we haven't seen the entirety of set 3 and how Battle Droid tokens and Clone Trooper tokens are going to play out. I'm really wary about these cards because there is a possibility that your opponent could just sit there and knock off all your Battle Droid tokens because they expect you to be exploiting cards out. If they're doing that, are you going to be able to recover? And that's something that we have to consider, because unlike games like Magic the Gathering, you can just choose not to block and choose not to sacrifice your units. But in this game, you don't really have that choice. Your opponent has that choice. And so if you're not able to set up, are you going to be able to play a card like this? I'm not 100% sure. But the effect is really powerful. It is a one-sided board wipe. You can completely destroy your opponent's setup. And it's each unit, not just non-leader units. It's their leader as well. So this could potentially have some impact. And this is a really good payoff if you do have the setup for it, right? Defeating 4 Battle Droid tokens and taking out even 2 of their powerful units is pretty impressive. Next up, though, we got a really interesting event, and I'm pretty excited about this one. It's a 3-resource event in double command. Choose one, create 2 Clone Trooper tokens, or create 3 Battle Droid tokens. So, as I mentioned earlier, if you're going to be playing cards that have exploit, you need some way to create Battle Droid tokens and Clone Trooper tokens. The only issue with this is it's double command. Double command is a little bit sketchy. Now, we saw Gore earlier, and Gore is just command, so you can do it either way. And it can pair with manufactured soldiers, but something like the Invasion of Christophsis can't work with this card, right? Or most likely won't, because either this one's going to cost 5 or Invasion of Christophsis is going to cost 17 resources, right? So that's probably not going to be something that you could actually play. But creating 3 Battle Droid tokens really sets you up for exploit. Absolutely. However, are you willing to be playing an event that you then kind of have to play another card and then you sacrifice everything that this event got you to get some value? I'm not 100% sure. So the Battle Droid side, the creating exploit fodder, isn't that exciting to me, because essentially, let's say you're trying to play Gore or a card like that, the Pirate Super Battle Tank or whatever, like Hailfire Tank, whatever, it's 8 cost. Yeah, you could sacrifice 2 Battle Droid tokens, but you kind of paid the full cost of Hailfire by playing the event and the Hailfire, right? Because while the Hailfire gets cost reduced, this one created it, so you had to pay 3 resources plus the additional resources that you still have to pay after exploiting. And you end up with, yes, 1 big body, but that can just be killed. The Clone Trooper side of things, well, that one's a little bit more exciting to me, because creating 2 2/2s is nice to set up any sort of coordinate synergies. Like, let's say you have initiative, you go turn 1 Echo, turn 2 you play manufactured soldiers, suddenly you have 2 2/2s and a 4/4. that's a pretty nice curve. Like, that's pretty powerful. Not a lot of decks can deal with a 4/4 on turn 2, and in fact, you'll just be able to get a lot of value trades in. And yes, they can knock out a Clone Trooper token for sure, and maybe keep their unit around, but now they're knocking out Clone Trooper tokens, you might still be able to attack, and you might still be able to put something down to get Coordinate back. So this is nice for Coordinate. I think it's less nice for Battle Droid tokens, but I could see some uses for either, depending on, again, how things shape up. Next up, we have the Confederate Tri Fighter. I don't remember how many cards we have. We have 3 more cards, including this one. Confederate Tri Fighter. This one is pretty interesting. We have a 3-resource space unit. In Aggression Villainy, it's a 3/3 Separatist Droid Vehicle Fighter. And it says bases can't be healed. So if you're looking at this card and you're thinking, okay, people are playing Make an Opening, people are playing Vigilance, people are playing whatever card that they're playing that heals them as well, the client. This is a really nice hate card for that. And I think it does a way better job than something like Wolf. Yes, Wolf costs 2, but the 3/2 stat line has always hurt him. And I have sideboarded him a little bit in set 1. But to be honest, the more I played set 1, and well, I basically have never used him in set 2, the more I found that the 3/2 stat line is just too weak. And the fact that he only affects the game if you've attacked or when you play him is too weak, because you need to have initiative for him to do anything. This card just straight up needs to be dealt with if you want to heal. And that's a lot more impressive. If your opponent's playing restore cards, they can't be healed. If your opponent's playing, as I said, the removal spell, those are things that remove plus heal. In some cases that will work. Like if you play Vigilance, they could defeat the Confederate Tri Fighter and then heal, but that's not defeating something else that might be a little bit more important to you. So this one, definitely a hate card. I see it more of as a sideboard card, because a 3-resource 3/3 in space needs to have something relevant, and the bases can't be healed isn't always relevant. It is a lot of the time based on how the meta shaped up, but not all the time. So we'll see if that ends up being viable. 2 more to talk about today, and the next one is, I know, some of your favorite. This is a Kotti Mundi ground unit, 5 cost, Vigilance card, 5/7, Force Jedi Republic, and has Coordinate. When an opponent plays their second card each phase, you may draw 2 cards. So this was a legendary. It is not a heroism unit, which I'm a little bit surprised by. Not that Kotti Mundi is necessarily like the most heroic Jedi or anything like that if you read the comics, but this is definitely surprising to see, especially with the Jedi and Republic tags. You would expect it to be a heroism unit, but what that means is you do not need to be playing this in necessarily a Republic deck. However, with the Coordinate ability, in order to get this trigger, which is you drawing 2 additional cards anytime an opponent plays their second card, you're going to need 2 other units on the battlefield. So first off, the stat line, it's just a solid stat line. If you look at the 5-resource stat line, we're looking at 6/6 as the premium stat line. So a 5/7 has the same amount of stat points. It does not trade well into Poe Dameron, because Poe Dameron just kills it, but nothing really trades well into Poe Dameron most of the time. Wrecker still just kills Kotti Mundi, and Wrecker lives, so that's something to consider. The 5/7 stat line is definitely a decent chunk worse than a 6/6 stat line. Heck, even Zuckuss is a 6/6. But a 5/7 stat line is pretty good. The Coordinate ability doesn't seem all that great to me in what you're trying to do. If you look at like soft control decks, Kira Green, Hondo Blue, you're not really going to have multiple units on the battlefield in order for the Coordinate to trigger. And if you are, you probably already won the game. Right? Kira Green, yes, it puts units on the battlefield. Pike Sentinel, Hylobot Enforcer, Childson in some cases, Death Trooper, all of those come down early, right? But generally speaking, you're not going to keep those on the battlefield to the point where you're going to have Coordinate available to you, and not only have Coordinate available to you, but your opponent also has to place 2 cards, and the payoff is drawing 2 cards, which isn't even that insane. Yes, drawing cards is good, but it's nowhere near Magic level of drawing cards. On another note, if you're playing a Republic deck and you're trying to go wide and playing this token theme where you are going to be able to trigger Coordinate a lot, the drawing 2 cards is actually a lot more impactful, because you're trying to deploy all your units to trigger Coordinate, right? This is probably going to be a combination of deploying units that make more units and deploying cheap units. So this could be a card that you want to be playing in that deck, but it has Vigilance as its aspect, which is a little bit odd. I could see this maybe in like an Obi-Wan aggression coordinate style, or like Sentinel style, maybe go a little bit bigger deck. But to be honest, I think the aspect doesn't really match what you're trying to do with coordinate, and coordinate doesn't match what you really want to be doing in control decks, which is, well, controlling the board and not deploying units. All that said, this to me does not seem like a very strong legendary. I know some people are excited about it, and I hate to be the person that says, you know, I'm not a huge fan of this card, but I really am not a huge fan of Kotti Mundi, at least at the current moment. Last card we have to talk about is Unnatural Life. It's a 3-cost event, Cunning Villainy, Force event. Play a unit that was defeated this phase from your discard pile. It costs 2 less and enters play ready. At the start of the regroup phase, defeat it. So pretty sweet art. This is definitely sweet, absolutely sweet art. Probably my second favorite art so far after the Waxer and Boyle art. Maul, or I guess in this case, Darth Maul, going a little bit insane in the trash pits. Eventually becoming the Maul that you know and love from the card that we saw earlier from the Clone Wars. But this does not seem like an incredibly powerful event. It's a little bit interesting, but it's essentially, well, not giving you the full discount cost because it only costs 2 less. So let's say you have a 3-cost unit, you had it be defeated, you want to replay that 3-cost unit. Well, now it costs 4 essentially with Unnatural Life. And it's almost like a sneak attack, but instead of sneak attack coming from your hand, it's just going to only be able to be used by things that had died this phase. And that's it. That's it. You're not going to be able to go ahead and pick something from your hand, pick any card from your discard pile. If this was play any unit in your discard pile, it costs 2 less. I would be a little bit more excited about it because this could be something like a reanimation that we haven't really seen too much in Star Wars Unlimited. And then you just get one big hit in with it. That could be interesting. But the fact that it must have been a unit that was defeated this phase just has way too many kind of unfortunate circumstances, right? If your opponent goes ahead and defeats it after you take initiative, you can't use it. If your opponent goes ahead and just doesn't defeat your units, it's kind of unfortunate for you. If you're trying to sacrifice units in to try to get this to work, that's probably not a good situation for you either. It just seems way too situational for this card to be exceptional. There might be some sort of tempo deck that uses this sort of as like a burn effect where you trade off with a unit, you play this, you get that unit back. Maybe it's something like a Fleet Lieutenant, so you get to attack in. Well, I can't even be a Fleet Lieutenant because that's heroism. But maybe it's like a Snow Trooper Lieutenant or something like that, where you get to attack with something, get in some extra damage, and then this thing gets defeated. I suppose one of the cool things with this is if you could somehow give this unit Sentinel, that could be interesting, where you revive a unit, you give it Sentinel, now your opponent has to attack that unit if they want to attack that turn. But it has to be an easy way to give something Sentinel, like Grievous's action, for example. Overall, not that impressed with this card. But we did get some sweet ones today, and I will say, my goodness, is the Maul leader pretty interesting. I am excited to see what a 6/6 leader flip can do. The Invasion of Christophsis seems absolutely sweet. Can't wait to get that one off. Manufactured Soldiers is exactly where I wanted this set to go. This type of card, ability to create a bunch of tokens, is pretty important to set up for the coordinate and exploit synergies. And then Kotti Mundi, let me know what you think about this legendary in the comment section down below. This seems like a little bit of an underpowered legendary going forward, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. And I'm sure I'm going to be wrong about some of these cards. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching, everyone. Be sure to check out the Patreon if you want to talk about the cards in my Discord, and I'll see you all for the next one.